Okay, guys, this is your 6.3 quiz review. Each little thing that I go over is going to be on your quiz, so make sure you understand how to do this. The first thing I want to look at is reference angles. You need to remember that reference angles are always positive and acute. Always positive, always acute. So make sure you check that when you get your answer here at the end. If the angle given to you is in quarter one, then the angle that they give you is equal to the reference angle. If they give you the angle in quarter two, you're going to take 180 minus the angle to get the reference angle. In quarter three, it's the angle given minus 180. And in quarter four, it's 360 minus the angle given. So if I look here at 3A, I have 150 degrees. Well, in order to figure out where that is, what quadrants, we can just write down our four quadrants, and I say 150. Well, 150 is going to be over here, in between 90 and 180. That's in quadrant 2. So the rule for quadrant 2 is 180 minus the angle given. So 180 minus 50 gives me 30 degrees. To check that, is your angle acute and positive? You're good to go.
Tutoring him, so he's been holding his own.
Acute and positive, so you're good. All right, so now we go to 330. Well, I think 330, okay? I have 0, 90, 180, 270. Where is 330? It happens to be here in quadrant 4. So what's the rule for quadrant 4? You take 360 minus the given angle, and again, we get 30 degrees, okay? Is that positive and acute? Then you're fine. Same process, guys, if you're given the angle measure in radians. I personally would tell you to convert to degrees first. Sometimes it's easier for us to think in degrees. So if we're going to convert here, my pi's will cancel out. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 180 60 times. And then when I multiply, 4 times 60, I get 240 degrees. So I think, okay, 240, where's 240? 0, 90, 180, 270. That's going to be in quadrant 3. So the rule for quadrant 3 is the angle given, 240, minus 180. And when I subtract that, I get 60 degrees. Now, I'm not going to keep my answer as 60 degrees. I'm going to check, make sure that's acute and positive, but I'm not going to answer in degrees because my problem started off in radians. So I'm going to convert back to radians. So 60 goes into 183 times. So my answer here, my reference angle, would be pi over 3. Now when we get to C, guys, when we have a negative, all that is telling you a direction. So when you're finding reference angles, you can go ahead and just pretend like that negative's not there. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to convert 180 on top, pi on the bottom. So my pi's cancel out. 6 goes into 180 30 times. So I have 23 times 30, which is 690 degrees. Well, where is 690 on the unit circle? Well, it's bigger than, or on the coordinate plane. It's bigger than an entire circle. So let's subtract a whole circle. And I get 330. Now we can look at 330, and 330 happens to fall where? Right here in the fourth quadrant. So it's 360 minus 330, which gives me 30 degrees. But again, my problem started off in radians, so I'm going to answer in radians. So 180 on the bottom pi here, I get pi over 6. All right, the second set of questions, they're going to ask you, what is the exact value? I'm going to give you two or three angles that are on the unit circle, and I'm going to give you a unit circle. You need to memorize this, that the sine is the y part of the ordered pair. The cosine is the x part of the ordered pair. Tangent is y over x. Cosecant is 1 over y. Secant is 1 over x. And cotangent is x over y. So the way that I would tell you guys to look at this is sine. Well, sine is the y value. So I'm going to first remind myself that I'm looking for the y value, and then I'm going to go to 150 on the unit circle. And 150 is negative root 3 over 2 and 1/2. So it's negative root 3 over 2 and 1/2. And I know I want the sine, so I want the y value. So my answer here would just be 1/2. That's the y. Cosine is the x value. So I'm going to write x value, and then I'm going to go to the unit circle at 210. And it's negative root 3 over 2. Negative 1/2, negative root 3 over 2, negative 1/2. And since I want the x value, my answer is negative root 3 over 2. Simple as that. Cotangent, I know because I'm going to memorize this, that cotangent is x over y. So then I'm going to go to 210, and I say, oh, we just had 210, so it's negative root 3 over 2, and negative 1/2. So x over y, I take my x value, negative 1/2, divided, I'm sorry. Well, let's rewrite that. It's x over y. So my x is negative root 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. We're going to keep change flip. So negative root 3 over 2 times negative 2 over 1. My 2's cancel out, my negatives cancel out, and I'm left with the square root of 3. Okay, I want the tangent of 90 from our ratios up here. Tangent is y over x. So y over x, and the ordered pair at 90 on my unit circle is 0, 1. 0, 1. So I'm going to take the y value, which is 1, put over the x value, which is 0. If you guys have 0 in the denominator, that is undefined. Guys, please remember that. 0 in the denominator is undefined. If you have 0 in the numerator, if you had 0 over 1, your answer would be 0. But here, when 0 is in the denominator, your answer is undefined. So same thing goes here, guys, for radian. Excuse me. I look and I say I want the sine. Sine is y value. So what is the ordered pair at 2 pi over 3? So I look at 2 pi over 3. It's negative 1/2 root 3 over 2. Negative 1/2 root 3 over 2. And the y value is right here. So my answer would be root 3 over 2. 5 pi over 6, tangent. Tangent is y over x. The ordered pair at 5 pi over 6 is negative root 3 over 2, 1/2. Negative root 3 over 2, 1/2. So to set this up, I would say y, which is 1/2, divided by negative root 3 over 2. So we're going to keep change flip. So keep change flip. My 2's cancel out, so I have 1 over negative root 3. Well, we can't have a root in the denominator, so we're going to rationalize. So I end up with negative root 3 over 3. And that's that. You guys will be given the unit circle. So now when I come to these questions, guys, there's no math computation involved here. You just got to think. You need to remember, are all students take calculus, where in A, in the first quadrant, all 6 trig functions are positive. In the second quadrant, sine and its reciprocal cosecant are positive, everything else is negative. In the third quadrant, tangent is positive and cotangent, everything else is negative. And then in the fourth quadrant, we have cosine and secant are positive, everything else is negative. So, if we look at this question, number 1, the first piece of information will tell me 2 things I can cross off. Then the second piece of information tells me what my answer is. So in 35, they tell me at the beginning that sine is less than 0. That means sine is negative. So I know I can cross off the first quadrant because everything is positive there. I know I can cross off the second quadrant because that's where sine is positive. The second piece of information tells me, okay, cosine is less than 0, which means negative. Well, in the remainder, what's left over, cosine is positive here in the fourth quadrant, so that leaves that my angle must lie in quadrant 3. All right, let's do it again. Let's look at this again. I have all students take calculus. The first thing they tell me is tangent is less than 0. That means tangent is negative. So I know it's not in the first quadrant where everything's positive, and it's not in the third quadrant where tangent is positive. Then the second thing they tell me is sine is less than 0. So that means sine is negative. Well, I know in the second quadrant, that's where sine is positive. So I know I'm left with quadrant 4. This one, all students take calculus. So I look at 37 and I say, okay, secant, well, secant goes with cosine, and its secant is positive, greater than 0. So where is secant and cosine positive? Well, that occurs in the first, and that occurs in the third. So fourth, so I can cross off 2 and 3. And then tangent is less than 0. That means tangent's negative. Well, in the first quadrant, everything's positive, so I know I'm going to end up in quadrant 4. And the last one, we're talking about cosecant. Well, cosecant goes with sine. A different color, sine. So sine is greater than 0, meaning positive. So in the first quadrant, everything's positive. In the second quadrant, sine's positive, so that means I can cross off 3 and 4. Then the second piece of information tells me that cosine is negative. Well, I know that everything in the first quadrant is positive, so I can cross that first quadrant out. So I know that I'm looking at quadrant 2. All right, that's all the work that you have to do there. You just have to know what's happening where. In the case where they ask you for the area of a triangle, guys, okay, it's important that you understand what they're asking and the information that is given to you. The area formula for an oblique triangle is the two sides and the angle in between. All right, so I have a side here, 14, and I have side 21, and I have side 18. I need two sides and the angle that is in between. If you notice here, 37 is in between 14 and 21. So that means I need to use these two sides and the angle that's in between. So I'm going to say 14 times 21 times the sine of 37, and I'm going to divide all of that by 2. So you guys can either do the numerator, hit enter, then hit divided by 2, or if you want to do everything at the same time, you have to have the numerator in one big set of parentheses. So it doesn't matter how you do it. So when I do that in my calculator, I get about 88.47. Okay, there's my area. Same thing here. Area equals, I need two sides and the angle in between. So I'm going to say 13 times 17 times the sine of 88 divided by 2. So in my calculator, when I do that, I get 110.43 about. So very straightforward problem there. You kind of know the formula. All right, the last thing I want to look at, and these can be tricky, but if you guys pay attention to what you're doing, it's really quite simple. You need to know these ratios. We're talking now when you're given an angle and they're not telling you where it is on the unit circle. They're going to tell you one of the trig functions, and then they're going to tell you where the angle lies, what quadrant. So you need to know that sine, the ratio is y over r meaning the hypotenuse. You need to know that cosine is the x over the r, tangent's y over x, cosine, and the reciprocals, as you guys can see. You also need to remember that you're just using a modified version of the Pythagorean theorem. X and y are the legs of your triangle, and r is the hypotenuse. All right, super simple to look at. So if I look at number, let's do 45. All right, there's a lot of work that goes into this, but you guys can handle this, no problem. It's the sine of theta equals 3 over 5. And they tell you that theta lies in quadrant 2. All right, now you have a lot of information just given to you. We know that we need to find the x value, the y value, and the r value. Well, we're given already 2 pieces of information. I also know that this angle lies in quadrant 2. So the signs in quadrant 2, my x value is negative, my y value is positive. So I can say here, x is negative and y is positive. When they tell me sine, they're giving me y over r. So I know y is 3 and r is 5. So I can find x by saying x squared plus 3 squared equals 5 squared. X squared plus 9 equals 25. X squared equals 16, so x is 4. And I know it happens to be negative 4 because of where the angle lies on our coordinate plane. So now that I have my x, y, and my r, it's super easy to find all the trig functions. You can say sine of theta, sine is y over r. So sine is my y is 3 over 5. So my cosecant of theta is r over y. So I simply flip it and I say 5 over 3. Cosine theta is x over r. So what's my x value? Negative 4 over my r value of 5. Secant of theta is r over x. So my r value is 5 over my x, which is negative 4. Then I have tangent. Well, tangent of theta is y over x. So my y value is 3 and my x value is negative 4. Cotangent theta is x over y, so I have, negative 4 over 3. And there's all 6 of our trig functions. Just have to pay attention to the information that they give you. If I look at, let's do 46. Okay, 46 says cosine theta is negative 7 over 12, and the angle lies in quadrant 3. All right, well, quadrant 3, I know the signs in quadrant 3 are both negative. X and Y are negative. So I have X equals, Y equals, R equals. I know that X is negative and Y is negative. When I use my Pythagorean theorem, everything's going to come out positive. So I know, because the angle is in the third quadrant, I know where it goes. I can also look at this and say, well, cosine is X over R. I know that that negative sign goes with the 7 because R is always, 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 always positive. So I can just simply say negative 7 squared plus Y squared equals 12 squared. 49 plus Y squared equals 144. So Y squared equals 95. So square root both sides, and Y equals root 95. Just leave it like that. Don't worry about breaking it down. I know it's going to be negative root 95. So when I do my 6 trig functions now, I say, okay, well, sine of theta. Sine is, remind yourself, Y over R. What's my Y value? Negative root 95. What's my R value? 12. So that means my reciprocal function, my cosecant of theta, is R over Y. So my R value is 12 over negative root 95. Can you have a radical in the denominator? No. So let's rationalize. Top and bottom by root 95. So I have negative 12 root 95 over 95. Big numbers, no problem. So now I'm going to say cosine of theta. Well, cosine of theta is X over R. So my X value is negative 7. My R value is 12. So my secant of theta is R over X. So I have 12 over negative 7. Lastly, we have tangent theta is Y over X. So my Y value is negative root 95. My X value is negative 7. So that's just become root 95 over 7. So my cotangent of theta is X over Y. So it's negative 7 over negative root 95. Can't have the root in the denominator, so I'm going to rationalize, and 2 negatives give me a positive. So I have 7 root 95 over 95. And there's my 6 trig functions. Once you find X, Y, and R, guys, it's actually not that bad to look at. You have to know these ratios. Let's do one more, and then we'll be done. Let's do tangent. Okay, given the tangent. So in this question, we'll do number 47. 47 says the tangent of theta is negative 3/4. Negative 3 over 4. And they tell me, in this case, they don't tell me the quadrant per se, but they tell me that the cosine is greater than 0. That means cosine is positive. Okay, so I know my tangent is negative, so if I'm going to look here and I say all students take calculus, the first thing I look at is tangent of theta is negative 3/4. That means it's negative, I'm sorry. So I know it's not in the first quadrant, and I know it's not here. The second thing they tell me is that cosine is positive. Well, the only way that cosine is positive other than the first quadrant is the fourth, so I know that my angle lies in the fourth quadrant. What I also know about that is to get to the fourth quadrant, I have a positive X value and a negative Y value. So I have my X, my Y, and my R. Tangent gives me X, Y over X. So looking at this, my X is positive, Y is negative, so it's... So I have my Y is negative 3, my X is positive 4, and my R we'll figure out now. So I have 4 squared plus negative 3 squared equals R squared. 16 plus 9 equals R squared, so 25 equals R squared, which means R is 5. So now, guys, we can very easily do our 6 trig functions. I can look and I say, okay, I say my sine of theta. Sine theta is Y over R. So my Y value is negative 3, my R value is 5. So that means cosecant theta is r over y. R is 5, and y is negative 3. We just flip. So cosine theta is x over r. So I have 4 over 5. So secant theta is r over x. So it's 5 over 4. Then we have tangent theta is y over x. So it's, excuse me, negative 3/4. And my cotangent of theta is x over y. So it's 4 over negative 3. And there you go. All right, so you guys, it's really important. You got to memorize your trig functions, the ratios, and make sure you are on top of everything with your signs and all that. So good luck. Your quiz is tomorrow over just section 6.3.